Merry Christmas. I'm Chaplain Larry Crabtree with the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office and the Maryland State Police.
And happy holidays. I'm Charlie Wharton, chaplain for the St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office.
Well, Charlie, we're doing something I think rather unique. It's the Christmas season, the holiday season is upon us, and we've kind of been taking a perspective following along Advent in some ways. Since we're chaplains and pastors, we have some familiarity with this preparation for what we call Christmas. And last time, remember, we talked about hope and how important that is for law enforcement officers, and we shared how we deal with some of the discouragements and hard times. But today, let's move on to that second piece of Advent that we would call peace. Peace. So, what are we talking about?
I think peace comes in two forms. The first one is an internal peace. And I think that is probably even more difficult to come up with than external peace. And that's that sense inside us that we're okay with where we're at. The other aspect of peace is the lack of conflict, of turmoil in our world. When I was growing up in law enforcement, you would every once in a while hear the phrase peace officer. In fact, in some of the statute books, you would come across that phrase. And I think that when I came out of the academy in Wyoming, I was certified as a peace officer. And that phrase really wasn't lost on me, because I think that's an important part of what we do in the law enforcement profession. We bring about peace.
Perhaps maybe we should be using that more often now. I think you heard that more a couple decades ago than we do today. We live down here in southern Maryland, here in St. Mary's County. We're very familiar with hurricanes. And those hurricanes are rough. I mean, it's a melee. You've got wind blowing that's like crazy, and trees are being uprooted. There's a lot of rain. Sometimes there's flooding. You can hear that wind howling. Law enforcement officers are working oftentimes in the middle of all of that. But it's the most eerie experience, if you've ever lived through it, when you get to the eye of that hurricane. It's surreal. I mean, you've got this melee going on around you, and all of a sudden, as the eye passes over, there is this absolute quiet, still tranquility. It just stops. And I think about, that's peace. And I think if law enforcement officers understand, they're called into the hurricane. So they're dealing with the melee, all these winds that are howling and moving. But in essence, they're trying to find that eye and to bring that peace. In essence, they could be the eye of the hurricane. And that's what a peace officer is. You're trying to move in. You're like one of those airplanes that actually flies into the eye, where they take their pictures and do their tests. I think it's a good illustration of what law enforcement officers are doing. They're trying to bring peace in the middle of the melee. And I know it doesn't end. You bring it for the time that you can be there, because like any hurricane, what happens? The eye continues to move. You come to the other side of the hurricane, and there's the melee again, but the winds are going the opposite direction. But it's always being on call and trying to find that center. That's peace. And I think that's a great illustration for the world we live in and the year we've been in 2020. It's been a year where it's been pretty rough. The winds have been blowing. It's been hard through this pandemic. All the political division that we've seen, and the racial reconciliation that's been taking place, and all of the cultural upheaval that we've been going through, is to be men and women that can still find that eye and find that peace. So we need to find it in ourselves somehow first, before we can bring it to others.
As I'm listening to you talk, there are two things that come to mind. The first one is that when we're called to a scene, we bring two buckets with us. One of them is filled with gasoline, and one of them is filled with water. And we get the choice when we go in to pour one of those buckets on the situation. We can either make it worse by throwing the bucket of gasoline, of anger, of hatred, or that bucket of peace, we can help resolve it. The second thing is that we all bring joy to a room. Some of us when we show up, some of us when we leave.
Right. So I prefer to be the one that brings it.
You want to be the one that brings it in when you show up, but sometimes we're the other way. But when we talk about peace, that is so important in what we do. And not only out there in the world, but I think also in our agencies and in our families as well.
I think law enforcement officers got in this career because they really want to be agents of peace. I don't know why else you would do this. You want to make a difference in people's lives. You're not here to make their lives worse. You're here to make their lives better. You're here to protect them. And so what a gift when you understand that you can be an agent that brings peace into people's lives. I like the idea of being called a peace officer. And this season of the year reminds me more than ever, because in the Christian faith, we're looking to our God who's brought that to us. And so we kind of exemplify that. I think it's a cool thing.
And we also, if we can preach just a little bit more on this.
Sure, it's Christmas.
When we do that, we become reflective of the peace that is inside us.
Yes.
And, we're called to be peacemakers. Why? Because we have that peace inside us.
And that's it. You've got to have it inside you first before you can give it away. And so, again, that's where it helps to have each other. Because, let's face it, we're not always going to be at peace. You and I both have times where we kind of are churned up and struggle. But it's good to find that eye where that calm tranquility is, and to know that in ourselves, and then share that with everyone around us.
Do you find it beneficial when you're kind of stirred up to go to a quiet place on your own? Do you find peace there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and what a great place to live for that. I mean, if I'm really struggling, going through a hard time, I will look for somewhere with water where no one else is at. I'll often go over to Solomon's Island, sit on the rocks out there, just overlooking where it's quiet, watching the birds, just being alone, finding center, just letting all that hurt and think, just process what's going on. So yes, a quiet place. Vacations are really important. We talked about this, I think, before. Law enforcement officers are notorious for not utilizing their vacation time and kind of banking it. And I will preach all the time, no, use that time, because that's where you find some peace. That's where you're able to settle, getting away from everything and to replenish.
And I think we talk a lot about the opportunities, the economic opportunities in law enforcement, and quite frankly, you can make a lot of money working the overtime.
Oh, yeah.
But at what cost is it? If you're constantly going and going and going and going, you never personally experience that peace, that quiet, that downtime. Whether you call it mindfulness or peace or whatever else you call it, as people, we have to have that.
Yeah, and peace is beautiful, isn't it? I mean, peace is a wonderful thing to experience, but it's even more enjoyable, and it means more if I have enough in me that I can share it and bring peace to others.
When we go out into the world, people call us in law enforcement because they don't know what else to do. They are at the very end of their rope. And when we come in and when we have the ability to bring peace into their lives, we truly do what we've been called to do.
Absolutely. So I certainly hope that our brothers and sisters can find that peace themselves, enjoy that peace, and that they become the best peace officers this world has ever known. Well, until next week, be strong
And be safe.